So if you're like me, you might have picked up a bunch of cracked and ritual pots in Elden Ring on your first playthrough and then never used a single one. The crafting system and resource scarcity I felt like didn't encourage me to make and use them, but I felt like kicking things up a notch and trying to use only pots for the entire game, and that is absolutely not an open and shut case for being possible. It was pretty questionable whether or not I'd be able to do it at all. I hit walls multiple times that seemed nigh impossible to overcome. This is very different from like a consumables only challenge. To be clear, the following things are not pots. Shields are not pots. I can't block attacks or parry. Spells are not pots. Perfumes are not pots. I know they both start with P and function similarly, but they are not pots. Throwing weapons are also not pots. That's a somewhat arbitrary list since you could argue that things like flasks, the horse, or armor are not pots, but that's what I'm working with for the rules. The only things I can deal damage with are pots, and sometimes my fists if I get bored. Armor is fine, but I'm only interested in wearing a skirt and a pot on my head because that is peak fashion, and I can't use weapons or shields. So to answer the burning question up front, are pots good? No, not really. I mean, they're not bad. Some of them are really good. They're okay, I guess. Early game, they're pretty strong, but you're also going to struggle to have a meaningful amount unless you run around specifically trying to collect a bunch of them. There are also so many different types, it's hard to make blanket statements. If you optimize as hard as you can, they're going to deal decent damage, and they do let you keep some distance, which is nice, but they're also really slow to throw. Fire and lightning pots scale with strength and dex, so they can supplement melee builds decently well with elemental damage and range. The magic and holy pots consume FP, and I feel like you might as well just cast a spell at that point instead of throwing a pot. The utility pots range from completely worthless, like the oil pot, to pretty damn strong, like rot pots. Sleep pots are situationally very strong, like against Godskin enemies, particularly against Godskin Duo, and volcano pots are pretty powerful. Also, there are a lot of bosses in Elden Ring, and I'll be real, most of them aren't super interesting or enjoyable to fight. I'm gonna beat the game and do whatever side content I feel like, but this is not an all bosses run, and the amount of HP bloat on late game bosses is just exhausting, and I had little interest in doing the late game optional bosses like Moog, Blasudasax, and Malenia. Not that I didn't give them a shot, just that I didn't feel like grinding them out and trying to optimize every single possible thing to see if I could do it. To start out, I need to run around and collect a bunch of pots. I start with 3 as my gift, but to get enough to kill anything noteworthy, I need quite a few more. It's impossible to craft items mid-combat, so I need to bring enough pots up front to kill a boss. For the first hour or two, I am just riding around and picking up pots. I get the cookbook near Stormveil Castle to craft fire pots, and then farm the resources by the nomadic merchant in Liurnia to make some. This isn't a good spot, it was just convenient for where I was. With that said, I would guess that this entire run was about 75% farming and 25% actually playing the game. Because my god, making firebombs craftable with materials that cannot be bought makes it a phenomenal pain in the ass. I greatly preferred the system of every FromSoft game before this, of just buying the consumable instead of farming the material to then craft it. Sure, you can craft on the fly in Elden Ring, but you can't craft in combat, so it's not that much better. I pick up some more pots and find better farming locations, and now, with 12 pots, I go ahead and beat up the boatman. 12 pots is not nearly enough to kill him, so I have to run away mid-fight, but I come back with 12 more, and it should be more than enough damage. He is no match for my Erdtree juice pots. Except he is a match, because they use FP for some reason, so I have to run away again to make fire pots. And finally, the boatman dies. And now, I go back to getting more pots and materials. I kill some small bosses here and there and take out a few Erdtree avatars for runes. They're quite weak to fire, so fire pots can do a ton of damage. At first, I completely misread my pots and I thought that the cursed blood pot would cause bleeding, because, there's blood in the name. So I'd been killing bears for beast blood. But no, it enrages summoned spirits? Okay, I don't really know what that means. I guess it has something to do with like the spirit calling bell, but honestly I have no idea. I didn't use any of them. I grab a lot of the cookbooks for the various pots, but unfortunately a lot of them just aren't very good. Well, they are good, but they take extremely rare and difficult to acquire ingredients like these, right here. There's a very limited number of old fangs that you can pick up in the world, and the only way to get more is to farm them, and they are not a common drop. I'm also not an arcane build, and my item discovery sucks. I had heard that these Misbegotten in Morn Castle could drop old fangs, and I need them, otherwise my ritual pots are completely useless because they're the only one that I can use at this point. But oh my god, the drop rates are abysmal, and I have to farm mushrooms and butterflies to craft fire pots, to then use those fire pots to farm Misbegotten so I can get old fangs to make red main fire pots, and the whole thing just takes so long. I quickly give up on these guys and instead go farm the boars near the Third Church of America. They at least don't attack back much. I also start farming glintstone fireflies to make magic pots because those are easier to make than fire pots and both will instantly kill a boar. The problem is, these red main fire pots are for killing tough enemies, like bosses. I'm going to use all of my weak pots first, and then start using the strong ones, but if I die, I have to just go back and foam the pots again. Or, worst case scenario, I use all of my pots, and it's not enough to kill the boss. I start from nothing and just go back to foaming. Seriously, it's nothing but foaming, and it only gets worse as the game goes on because I have more pots to replenish. On that note, this is where I went to found materials throughout the game. For mushrooms, I went to the Church of Pilgrimage in the Weeping Peninsula. For smoldering butterflies, there are a bunch of them by the Warmaster's Shack in Stormhill. There's also gold-tinged excrement along the path there. For Fulgur Bloom, there are 2 patches near Castle Sol, but earlier in the game, I went by the Putrid Avatar in Caelid and then would die and respawn at that Stake of Marika. For Old Fangs, I killed these boars by the 3rd Church of Marika. For Glintstone Fireflies, I went west from the Scenic Isle and picked them up there. I got toxic mushrooms from the Church of the Plague, rhymed crystal buds from the trees southwest of Ordina, fire blossoms near the Zamora ruins, volcano stones in Seathwater River, and blood-tinged excrement in the Mogwin Dynasty Blood Lake. Oh yeah, and then there's these bastards! By far the most powerful pot in the game in terms of damage potential, Rot pots take Aeonian butterflies. Best way to farm them is in the Lake of Rot from the Basilisks, but they're still not a very common drop. Once you kill Commander Niall, you can get the Silver Scarab to buff drop rates, and I eventually respec'd into an Arcane build to improve the drop rates from the Basilisks. Silver Pickled Fowl feet also help a lot, and you can farm the feet pretty easily just past the Church of Ella. In any case, I get enough pots to feel comfortable taking on Stormveil Castle. I've picked up more or less every pot that I can at this point, although I didn't feel like going to Altus Plateau quite yet. Morgott is up first, and I've got more than enough damage for him. I'm more concerned with hitting him than avoiding damage, but he's not too jumpy and his openings are long enough to land pots easily. I blast him with a 12th pot, dump another few points into strength, and head on to Stormveil proper. More important than Godrick, Stormveil has 2 pots to pick up inside. That is huge. You know, if Godrick had grafted pots onto himself, maybe I'd be a bit more interested. Actually, he deserves to be punished for not doing that. Like, he's got pots right outside his door, but at no point in time considered grafting them onto him. Like, what the fuck, man? I head in to test the waters, and the damage isn't too bad. I know I don't have enough to kill him right now, but I should be able to deal enough if I come back with all of my pots. I need to get more mushrooms first, and then more butterflies, and we are back in business. Alright, Godrick, it's time to teach you a lesson about bad decisions. But apparently the bad decisions are all mine, since his whirlwind attack deflects projectiles. I miss one single pot, and also mistakenly throw one here and only deal half damage, and it's not enough damage. If I had landed that pot, he would be dead. Instead, guess what? Back to foaming! More mushrooms, more butterflies, more old fangs. I kill the frenzied duelist, and... I said I kill the frenzied duelist, and... I kill the frenzied duelist in Gowl Cave. There, see, I did it. I'm John Elden Ring, and we are back, and now I know that he can deflect projectiles, so we are good, we are fine, nothing else could mess me up, and... It's not enough damage now. More mushrooms, more butterflies, more fangs. I killed this guy, he's weak to fire or something, and get his wounds, and then I kill this tree dude, and that tree dude, and I dump more levels into strength, and we are back, and we got this, and the damage is fantastic. Godrick doesn't stand a chance, and... Okay, but this time, the pots all hit, everything is perfect, and he dies, he's dead forever. Please let me leave, let me move on. Crunch on that memory, more strength, more butterflies, more mushrooms, more fangs. Off to play Burger King Pocket Bike Racer game. I find the King's Pet Dragon, and yeah, not doing that. I take a detour through Manors, the Hands of Fate, and then head to the racing track.
Now look, the sign pointed this way.
Mike, let's go back to the crossroads and ask those kids we saw.
Okay, but I know we can't be wrong. Look, the sign pointed this way.
Puppy time! It's Champion's Great Wolf. I mean Royal Rat Authority. I mean Ziph. I mean a dead Sif. And he was guarding another pot. It's a wonderful day if you ignore the dead dog. At this point, I seriously doubt my ability to kill both phases of Renalla. I need more power, and more power is an Altus Plateau. I get both halves of the Grand Lift, get lost and burn down another tree, take a ride up the elevator, stroll up to the capital, and nope, not doing that. I keep going, ride past the gargoyle, and... What I meant to say was ride around the gargoyle, get some butterflies, and head down to what is just a fantastic dungeon. I love this place. The imps, best enemy in the game, hands down. Trying to find out how to get to both side areas for both pots, not the least bit annoying. And the boss, well, it is genius. Give frenzied duelists slightly different weapons and throw in a few pots as side enemies. Miyazaki really outdid himself here. And it's finally time for me to get the volcano pots. Just need to ride past everything, dodge around, and what? Like I said, run past everything. Yeah, I'd rather not right now. I try to pick up a map, but instead read a lovely message and get roped to death. I get the Fire Scorpion Charm to buff my damage a bit more, buy the Volcano Pot recipe, get more fangs, and head to Lothric Castle to kill Prince Loretta. Something. More pots and pots from the second creepiest guy in Korea Manor. I pledge my life and soul to a female Machamp and parkour! Back to Burger King. First, the funny little thing. Killing these ladies with Volcano Pots doesn't count towards breaking Renalla's shield. I also need to waste 6 pots just killing them, and then a few more on first phase Renalla, and then still have enough left over to kill her in phase 2. That is a lot. I make it there a few times, but it's just not nearly enough damage. She also turns invulnerable repeatedly during several of her attacks, which can nullify my pots. I need to re-strategize, and the best bet is to kill her in one burst in phase 1 to save pots. I kill the Dragon Bear or Putrid Avatar for runes, get the Ritual Sword Talisman, and pump as much damage into her as quickly as I can, finishing her off with a red main fire pot. With all the pots I save, I had a few to spare and I could kill her in phase 2. I finally head off to Round Table Hold, talk to the Hand's girlfriend, and head on over to fight alternate reality Isaac Newton. Thankfully, Volcano Pots deal plenty of damage, and they are more than enough to take him out without much trouble. I came in just to test the damage, but realized that I could kill him. The runes are nice, but I just wanted to progress Alexander's quest to live out my role-playing fantasies and to unlock the Lake of Rot. I find him up in Liurnia, and I do technically use something that's not a pot here. I didn't understand what was going on, and I still don't really understand, but I think you need to do a certain amount of poise damage to free Alexander, or something. Only a jump attack with a jellyfish shield worked out of the items that I had. I then walk in on him taking a bath, and as you do, he gives me what effectively amounts to a child's body to put on my head. My next destination is the Lake of Rot. I head down to Mimic Town, have an existential crisis, and yeah, not doing that. Machamp takes me to Noxtella, I put on a lovely looking skirt, I go fight the Oolade Man, and I pick up the Rot Pot recipe. I kill these two and then go kill Draconic Tree Sentinel. Turns out he is kind of resistant to fire and lightning, and it really annoys me when bosses have completely unintuitive resistances that you would never be able to guess. This fight takes a while, but I can run away and go craft more items mid-fight. I run through Lanedell, give these guys a taste of their own medicine, kill Stray Demon, cook some beef jerky, head down to the depth for another pot, and yeah, no. Not weak to holy either. Magic and lightning? Probably not gonna happen. I get the last of my pots though, and it's Godrick time! I need to free aim my pot because of his thigh gap, but the damage is solid and he dies. On to Morgott, or as I like to call him, Morgott. My damage is still solid for this point in the game, and I feel pretty comfortable taking him out. He's dead. On to the wonderfully named Forbidden Lands. And yeah, I'm not doing that either. Damage isn't awful, but these guys just suck to fight and move around so much that trying to keep them in a fog cloud is just a chore. He's optional and there's no benefit to killing him, so yeah, no. Mountain time! I love mountains and mountain flowers that I can use to make more pots. Fire blossoms are one of the few ways to easily make ritual pots. Giant's flame pots scale with faith and use FP, which is kinda lame, but whatever. I head to Castle Sol, kill these lions for fangs, and kill Commander Niall. His summons are a headache, but Rot Pots can finally shine and Volcano Pots take him out. Not anywhere nice though, just to, like, Applebee's. I go to the Frigid Outskirts next, and I get to the Halig Tree with no difficulty whatsoever. I double back and go to Mogwyn Palace, and then give up on killing the boss with this damage, and then go back to the Halig Tree, and then decide that Loretta is also a bit too tanky to reasonably kill at the moment.
Aurora Borealis?
Though, I can kill that. The dragon's having a bit of trouble, but I burn it to death, slowly and painfully, like it deserves. I also take a trip to the side dungeon and kill an ancient hero of Zamor for the hell of it. I get to Fire Giant, and turns out he is quite resistant to fire, and has like 40,000 health. I'll be honest, I don't want to fight this boss. He is not very fun, and I would have to min-max the absolute hell out of everything, and land every pot perfectly on a weak spot like his head, and maybe that would be enough. Alternatively, we could have fun. And by fun, I mean flying on the horse, of course. There was a lovely glitch where you jump off the horse and quickly save and quit the game, and then kill the horse and resummon it and the horse's collision breaks. This lets me craft items mid-fight with Fire Giant because I can leave the arena and then come back. It's still difficult doing this because I can't really dodge his attacks well, and I get more or less one-shot, but it is miles more fun than actually fighting the boss. I go to Farum Azula, and now it's time for fun. So as you might have noticed, it's been getting very difficult to deal enough damage to kill these bosses, and Godskins are resistant to fire. There is a line, and only a single line, that I could find that would deal enough damage to kill these two. Spec fully into Arcane and use a combination of Swarm Pots, Freezing Pots, and Rot Pots. 20 Swarm Pots, 9 Rot Pots, and 1 Freezing Pot. I need to land almost every pot, 2 Rot Pots to rot Godskin Noble, 2 more to rot him again, a Swarm Pot to deal the last of his health, and then kill Godskin Noble. Then, when Godskin Apostle is resummoning Noble, throw 2 Rot Pots to rot him, and then 3 more Rot Pots to rot Godskin Noble again. Then use the Swarm Pots and Freezing Pots to bleed, freeze, and damage them to death. The problem is, getting Rot Pots takes a really long time, and this barely gets me enough damage. Once I put all my points into Arcane, Swarm Pots did enough damage that I could afford to miss a couple of those, but I can't miss any Rot Pots or Freezing Pots. Oh, and I also can't, die. I go ahead and farm some souls from the bird to put some levels into Vigor to avoid getting one-shot. I can't use a bow, but who needs a bow when you can shot put like a god? But I'm doing it. I land every pot, rot once, twice, 3, 4 times, bleed, 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 don't block my pot, die, bleed, 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 please, bleed, 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 bleed. Seriously, I probably spent like 10 hours just farming basilisks for rot pots. Since I had 1 rot pot left over on that attempt, I decided to bring the freezing pot and I faced them again, ready to... I face them down again, I rot once, block them on the pillar, hit him with the bleed pots, rot 2, rot 3, rot 4, phase 2 into bleed, but the pinball wizard strikes me down. Like hell I'm gonna give up because I suck at pinball. I've been to enough Chuck E. Cheeses to know that pinball is a terrible source of getting tickets anyway. Rot 1, 2, 3, 4, I find the openings that I can and I bleed them. We're getting there, the damage is good. The problem is the increasing resistances that the bosses have. The more I bleed them, the harder they get to bleed. If I can kill the Apostle, I know that the Noble will be locked into a summoning animation that I can abuse. Apostle dies, pinball dies, Apostle goes to resummon, bleed, bleed, more blood, freeze, kindly die! I would like to keep playing the game, thank you. It's time to go kill the weirdo that gave me a kid to wear on my head so I can take his insides and give them to a kid to improve my pots. Huh. I have to go and do Dialos' quest line, but I get the talisman from Joburg and I'm ready to move on to the boss gauntlet. Also, I'm just saying, Siegmeyer and Siegward didn't try to fucking kill me and eat me. Alexander didn't even go insane or anything. He straight up just wants to stuff me into his insides. That's fucked up. He's not a very friendly guy. I suspected you might have to kill a boss to progress Dialos' questline like Rhea in Dark Souls 1, and it seemed to work after I killed Astel. On to Maliketh. Unfortunately, he is way too jumpy to use Volcano Pots on, but Fire Pots deal solid damage to him. I use Volcano Pots around pillars on Beast Clergyman and then use the single hit pots on Maliketh. It's worth pointing out this is my first time fighting these bosses from this point forward, and I'm learning strategies as I go. But needless to say, I am basically a god and never even got hit. Killed him the first time I saw him, actually. Gideon's next, and since I haven't killed Malenia, Rykard, or Moog, his spell selection is pretty limited. Volcano Pots are pretty good at killing NPCs, so he doesn't give me much trouble. Being all-knowing is nice and all, but it'd probably be better to be all-seeing so you could avoid the large and extremely obvious cloud of death directly in front of you. Godfrey time! Honestly, the only one of the boss rush at the end of the game that I genuinely really liked fighting mechanically and visually the entire time. Maliketh's fun, but Beast Clergyman is pretty eh, Gideon's okay, I'd like Radagon a lot more if he didn't teleport, and I love Elden Beast visually, but god, some of those attacks, the health pool, and having to fight Radagon every single time is not fun. Took a few tries to get Godfrey down, and I'm still not very confident in Horror low, but Rot Pots eat away at his health, and Volcano and Fire Pots chip down the rest. Jumping the AoEs and dodging his attacks is genuinely really fun, and none of his attacks feel cheap, which isn't something I can say about most of the bosses in this game. I killed Horror low, and at this point, I have to admit defeat. I tried so much, but there was absolutely no way to deal enough damage to Radagon and Elden Beast with only pots. Radagon isn't terrible, he can be rotted and he isn't very resistant to fire, but Elden Beast has like 20,000 something health, is extremely resistant to all elements, and is completely immune to all status debuffs. It's not happening. I tried looking for glitches and cheeses, I tried clipping out of bounds and entering the fight, but none of it was working. So, to keep things thematic, I decided to use throwing consumables for Elden Beast. I'll kill Radagon with pots, use as many as I can against Elden Beast, and finish him off with the various throwing knives. Since I don't need to optimize, I am no longer farming rot pots, and I'm just going for Radagon with fire. It takes a few attempts, both getting through Radagon and Elden Beast, but I finally whittle down Radagon and start chipping away at the beast. Using throwing weapons was absolutely not making this easy. The damage is pretty awful, but I have hundreds to throw and I whittle them down. I still don't understand how to dodge this attack, but I get through the fight and I chuck the last of my pots at the cute little eldritch god that lives next door. It dies, and with that, the game is complete. I go back and kill Loretta, and then try out Liurnia, and I came to the conclusion that killing one of her phases is pretty reasonable, but getting through both with pots is not. Also, just the amount of damage she deals and the healing on hit sucks. I debated using throwing weapons like with Elden Beast, but stopped trying after a few attempts because it just wasn't fun. It also wasn't the challenge. It's not consumables only, it's pot only. She can't be killed with the rules that I've set as far as I can tell, and I am content with that. And that is pot only Elden Ring. 1 star, would not recommend. It's farming hell and there was a hair in my soup. Food was alright though. So it's currently like 5 AM. I've been editing this video for like 12 hours straight at this point. Yeah, I think more like 14 hours straight. I think it's taken longer to make this video than it has to record the footage. It took me like 10 hours to get the audio away that I wanted, and then I've been editing from like noon to I think like 1 yesterday, and then today I think like 2 to 5 AM. It was all worth it. That one Manos the Hands of Fate joke.